Hello and welcome back to Slide Into Sports live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schleier, and Rivalry Week went down with a bunch of drama as expected in college football. So many chaos scenarios that are going to be playing out. One of them is actually in the conference championship matchups, a scenario that I talked about, I think 2 weeks ago, within the ACC, where Duke could win the ACC and keep the ACC conference from getting an at-large bid because Duke would be ranked below two Group of Five conference champions. It's still alive. That chaos scenario is still alive, with SMU losing to Cal on Saturday, Miami winning, and Duke winning their games. It is now going to be Duke versus Virginia for the ACC title. Now, if Virginia wins, obviously, Virginia gets that at-large bid, and that's not really as chaotic or unexpected. But if Duke gets it, that's a whole different story. So that's something that, we are going to need to keep an eye on this coming weekend when Duke and Virginia battle it out in the ACC championship this coming weekend. And conference championship weekend is set for college football. So let's look at some of these matchups. Obviously, Indiana and Ohio State are battling it out in the Big Ten in Indianapolis. That is going to be on Saturday night at 7 p.m. This is the highest ranked matchup between two Big Ten teams in a really long time. I think it's definitely been more than 10 years since the number 1 and number 2 seed in the country face off in a conference championship, at least within the Big Ten. I think the SEC did it with Alabama and Georgia a little bit ago. I don't remember how long ago it was, but it definitely has been some time since that's happened. But that's not too surprising, just because that was when Kirby Smart was kind of on the rise. Nick Saban was still at the top, so that's not too much of a surprise to be there. And speaking of Alabama and Georgia, they are facing off in the SEC Conference Championship after Texas A&M took a loss to Texas. So now Georgia effectively is going to be in the SEC Championship due to tiebreakers and head-to-heads. And Georgia and A&M both are one-loss teams within the SEC, but because Georgia's only loss is to Alabama and Texas A&M's loss is to Texas, who has 2 losses in the SEC, Georgia wins that tiebreaker. They move on to the SEC Championship. That game is going to be played Saturday afternoon at 3 Central Time. Like we said earlier, Duke versus Virginia in the ACC title, that's also going to be on Saturday night, the same time as the Big Ten title game. Virginia currently ranked 18th in the country. Duke obviously unranked as of right now. Big 12 title, this is one that we've kind of seen coming since 2 weeks ago. It's going to be a rematch between BYU and Texas Tech. Now, there was a little bit of a scare for BYU on Saturday. BYU was down 14-0 to UCF at one point, but BYU was able to dig themselves out of the hole and win the game by double digits. So, it's back to normal, I guess, for BYU and Texas Tech. They're going to face off in Dallas Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Central Time. And the American Athletic Conference, and this one is, obviously the highest ranked Group of 5 as of right now. It's going to be North Texas versus Tulane. Now, both, and we're going to get to this in a little bit, but both North Texas' coach and Tulane's coach have taken up new jobs. So, this match will be kind of interesting because, if whoever wins that game, they're going to be in the playoffs. Both of these coaches have gotten permission from their new schools to be able to coach throughout the playoffs, to coach their teams throughout the playoffs. So, in a way, the loser will have a head start at setting up their future at their new school, because they're gonna have more time to hit the transfer portals, get some players from there, maybe even get some new assistant coaches built around them, like have more time to get settled into their new schools. All right, so with that, I think we just have to talk about the chaos within the rankings after what happened Friday and Saturday, because now there's only two remaining undefeated teams in the country, those being Indiana and Ohio State. Texas A&M, they were ranked 3 on Tuesday in the college football playoff poll. I don't know how far they're going to fall, though. I mean, the AP poll on Sunday, they put them at 7th. They moved them down to 7th above Oklahoma. Ole Miss, they had moving up a spot, but that was before the news broke of Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss to go to LSU, and we'll get to that later. But Texas A&M, where they fall, we'll see. Georgia will probably move up to 3. Texas Tech will probably move up to 4. So now there will be 3 conferences occupying the top 4 spots instead of just the SEC and Big Ten. So, I mean, that's good, I guess. Oregon will probably move up to 5. They'll probably be going up against either Tulane, North Texas, or JMU, one of those 3 schools, depending on the chaos that happens with the ACC and obviously whoever wins the American Athletic Conference and what the committee ends up deciding to do with those rankings. Ole Miss, I don't know if they're going to move them up or not. I could see, even though Ole Miss does have that head-to-head against Oklahoma, I could maybe see Oklahoma jumping them, despite having a close game against LSU at home. Oklahoma's offense has kind of looked a little meh, like they haven't been the same. So ever since John Mateer broke his thumb, like that Oklahoma offense just has not looked the same. Even when he's kind of settled in a little bit, he just has not looked like himself. The offense just hasn't looked like itself. But the one thing that their offense can do, they can be explosive when they need to be. That's ultimately how they ended up beating LSU, was they got an explosive play at the end that resulted in a touchdown, which put them ahead of LSU with less than 5 minutes to go in the game. So, I mean, a win is a win, but if your offense is looking stagnant like that, that's not a recipe for success in the playoffs, especially if you're a program like Oklahoma and you're trying to get to a national championship game. So, that, even though, again, with that game being as close as it was, I could see Oklahoma jumping Ole Miss because Lane Kiffin is leaving and he's also taking some of his other staff on the offensive side of the ball. So Ole Miss will probably be a different team, and we've seen the committee make decisions based off of different personnel, whether it's different players occupying certain positions or different coaches. I mean, we saw this in 3 years ago, and I believe it was 2023 when Michigan won their national championship. And Florida State, they got left out of the playoffs because they were on their third string quarterback, which was a change to their team. They argued that it was going to make their team perform differently, despite winning their remaining games on their schedule after their starting quarterback got hurt. So we'll see what happens with Ole Miss. This does open up the opportunity for teams like BYU, who has 1 loss. They are competing in the Big 12 title, so BYU could maybe jump up a couple more spots. Miami, another team. This is kind of the opportunity that they've been waiting for, since they're not going to be in the ACC title game. They now have to wait and see what happens with Duke and Virginia, obviously. Probably are going to have to wait and see what happens with Alabama, because Notre Dame doesn't have any games left on their schedule. So Miami can't hope that Notre Dame competes in a conference title, because Notre Dame is not in a conference. But if BYU loses, then Miami, they're probably the first team to jump up. I will say that much. Utah. Now, Utah ranks 13th last week. I could see them falling a spot or 2. After they kind of struggled against Kansas, and Kansas State the week before that. So if you're thinking about it in terms of the eye test, I'm a little nervous for Utah. Vandy, they got a huge win against Tennessee on the road, just completely blew them out. I believe they put up more than 40 points on that team. It was at Neyland Stadium, might I add. So I could see Vandy jumping up some spots as well. And Texas, obviously they have 3 losses and they did beat Texas A&M, but one of the questions after this weekend that has been on my mind and a lot of people's minds when it comes to college football is, does Texas deserve to be in the playoffs? Does Texas deserve a spot? The answer is not itself so simple, but in my mind it is, because we know what the criteria of the playoffs are. We see how many teams have 2 losses and won the games on their schedule. After the game, literally immediately after the game, in the interview on the field, Steve Sarkisian was already campaigning for Texas to be in the playoffs, and in the post-game press conference after his team left the field, he was campaigning for Texas to be in the playoffs because Texas scheduled Ohio State for their non-conference game. And people are saying, and including Sark, are saying, oh, well, if we didn't schedule Ohio State, we'd be 10-2, and we'd be in the playoffs, and it wouldn't be a conversation. However, I disagree. I disagree with that, because Texas, the other 2 losses they have, well, yes, Ohio State is, I guess, a quality loss. I don't like to use that term at all, but I guess, they have that quality loss against Ohio State. However, they also lost to a 4-win Florida team. A 4-win Florida team that lost to South Florida. That's pretty bad loss right there. And it was by a touchdown. They lost by a touchdown. And Florida was dominating that game the entire time. Texas had to crawl their way back, but Florida was in control the entire time. And then they go to Athens and they get blown out. They got blown out in Athens. Now, if that game was closer, if it was a 1-score game against Georgia at Athens, this would be a different conversation. But you have 2 really bad losses on your schedule. One of those losses being a game that you should have won, frankly. And you're whining and crying about not being in the playoffs. Think about South Carolina last year, right? Think about Alabama last year. They did a bunch of whining and crying, and then look what happened when they got to the bowl season, when they played Michigan, when they played Illinois. And they lost both of those games after all the whining and complaining and saying that they were going to prove everybody wrong, that they deserve to be in, that they were going to make these bowl games a statement win. I didn't see it. That's not what I saw when I watched those bowl games. Will Texas do that in their bowl games? I don't know. I don't live in hypotheticals. I don't know who Texas is going to play in whatever bowl game it's going to be, assuming that Texas doesn't make it into the playoffs. We don't know that yet. Frankly, Texas could play Michigan in whatever bowl game it is, whether it's the Pop-Tart Bowl or the Snoop Dogg Bowl. Who knows? But Texas, they're going to have to make a statement out of it, unlike Alabama and South Carolina last year, because otherwise the committee is not going to let 3-loss teams in, because you have to win your games. You just need to win your games and you're in. And the thing that drives me crazy about this whole thing is people talk about scheduling these teams like it's so easy to schedule like these way lower tier teams. Just like everyone else in college football, they only have 12 regular season games that they can schedule. UTSA, unfortunately, cannot play 20 games in the regular season. They can't. They can't schedule 20 teams. They can only schedule 12. And most of their opponents, they're in-conference opponents. That's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. So, again, it sucks. It does. But that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes sometimes. And you know what? If that means that there needs to be a change in how the out-of-conference scheduling works, then fine. The SEC next year is already going to be taking action and making 9 in-conference games instead of just only 8 in-conference games. So Texas is less likely going to be scheduling Ohio State in the out-of-conference matchups. Probably won't happen. They are scheduled next year, I believe, but it's at Austin. But either way, the point I am making is that you can't, it's a lot harder to schedule teams than people are making it out to be. You can't schedule a bunch of cupcake games the way that people think that you can. It's not possible. It just is not possible. And those teams that I just talked about, they have the probably best chance to make it into the playoffs, at least as at-large or conference champions. But, yeah. Anyway, kind of comparing to the AP poll here real quick. Top 3 is Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia. Or they have Oregon at 4. They moved Texas Tech up to 5. Ole Miss stayed at 6. They moved Texas A&M down to 7. Oklahoma was at 8. Notre Dame was at 9. Alabama's at 10. So those 3 teams, 8, 9, 10, stay the same. BYU at 11 stays the same. Miami moved up to 12. Vandy went down to 13, even though they did beat Tennessee 45-24, but Tennessee hasn't really had that impressive of a win this year, and I think the committee finally sees that. But, I mean, the committee's made some weird decisions this year, so they do have Texas at 14, and I think that is probably where the CFP committee is going to end up putting Texas. I think Texas will probably be 14th on their rankings. They're either going to be 14th or 15th, because Texas was at 16. I think Texas probably moves up 2 spots at most. They'll be lucky to get 13. I think 13 will probably be the highest that the College Football Playoff Committee will put them. But I don't think you can put them much higher. Virginia's at 16, USC 17. Michigan only moved down to 18, which, I mean, makes sense because it's a 1 seed versus a 15 seed. Not too surprising that Michigan didn't get punished too harshly. They moved James Madison up to 19. And this is the one difference that the AP has consistently had this year with the College Football Playoff Committee, is that they have James Madison as the highest ranked Group of 5 team, while the CFP committee has Tulane as the highest ranked Group of 5 team. The AP also has more Group of 5 teams in their rankings. They have North Texas at 20, Tulane at 21, and Navy at 23. Arizona jumped in at 22 after beating Arizona State. They crushed them. It was, especially in that fourth quarter, it was just total domination by Arizona. Georgia Tech only moved down to 24, which makes sense. I mean, you're playing a team that's ranked way higher than you. At this point in the season, you're not really going to get punished too harshly for that. And then Missouri at 25. I mean, Missouri and Tennessee basically were both at 25 because Tennessee got 71 points, Missouri got 73. I mean, just looking at the way the points kind of crumbled there at the end, it seemed like there was some deliberation as to who to put at from 23 to 25. There's a really low amount of points from all three of those teams. And then you've got Tennessee, Houston, Iowa kind of in that realm as well. So there's a few teams really that were getting votes that if you saw them in the AP's poll, you probably wouldn't really look twice at it. But yeah, that's kind of where the AP poll stands right now. And the one thing I'll give credit to both of these polls, at least the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks since the CFP has been coming out with their rankings, both of them have been pretty consistent with their criteria, or at least like where they have their teams standing. Like the CFP isn't really basing it too heavily off of what the AP has, which I like, and the AP isn't really basing it too much of what the CFP has. I mean, at the beginning, it seemed like the AP kind of tried to make adjustments to their poll to kind of mimic what the CFP had, but that hasn't really been the case anymore. But yeah, it's been a very interesting weekend for college football. And with that being said, let's move on to the coaching carousel, as it's called. I didn't come up with that name. I wish I did, because that's a pretty sick name. But the coaching carousel. And this is breaking Sunday, but Lane Kiffin, I said this earlier, but Lane Kiffin was hired by LSU. And when I did a Google search on it, it said that it was following the firing of Brian Kelly earlier in the week. But the reason it said that is because LSU earlier this past week decided to fire Brian Kelly without cause, finally. So, yeah, Brian Kelly is now officially fired, even though he hasn't been coaching the past, 3 weeks. But it is what it is, I guess. But I just thought that was a funny little thing that was noted with the hiring of Lane Kiffin. Ole Miss, they promoted the defensive coordinator Pete Golding to the permanent head coaching position. So for the playoffs, he is not going to be the interim head coach. He is going to be the new head coach, permanent head coach. He's Ole Miss's guy for the future, as far as we can tell. Florida then pulled the trigger on hiring Coach John Sumrall, who is the Tulane head coach. He's going to be taking over for Florida. He will still be coaching for Tulane if Tulane does end up making it into the playoffs after maybe winning the AAC conference title. Obviously, they have to go through North Texas first. But if they beat North Texas, he will still be coaching for Tulane in the playoffs. Auburn hired South Florida's head coach, Alex Golesh, from the American Athletic Conference to replace Hugh Freeze. And Hugh Freeze was there for 3 seasons at Auburn. Honestly, I like this hire a lot for Auburn. I think they need someone tough. Alex Golesh is kind of a he's a straight shooter, which I think that's kind of what Auburn needs right now. I figured Alex Golesh would go to either Auburn or Arkansas. It seemed like those would make the most sense. Florida maybe, but Florida, I don't know if he really would have fit in with the way Florida is right now. It seemed like Sumrall would have been the better pick for Florida, and it seemed like that's kind of where Florida and the fan base was leaning more as their second guy for Lane Kiffin. So, Florida fans, maybe you're happy. I don't know if you're really all that happy or not. I would be. I know you guys tried the group of 5 route before, but I feel like especially within the American Athletic Conference, there is a group of coaches that are really good and have shown that they can beat Power 4 opponents with less money and with different recruiting. standards. So, yeah, I think Summerall and Gulish are great hires for Florida and Auburn. And speaking of American Athletic Conference coaches being hired to SEC teams, we have Memphis's head coach, Ryan Silverfield, as the new Arkansas head coach. So the Arkansas athletic directors team, they moved on from Pittman, obviously, and then they had Paterno in there for a little while as interim head coach, and clearly it did not work out the second time. So they decided to hire Ryan Silverfield, and I think, again, pretty great hire for Arkansas. Silverfield is a proven coach. He beat Arkansas earlier this year. I think it's a great hire for Arkansas. And then, obviously, James Franklin was hired by Virginia Tech, and another American Athletic Conference head coach gets hired, but this time not from an SEC school, from a Big 12 school. Eric Morris from North Texas, who was their head coach. He's going to be replacing Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. And he's another one where he's still going to be coaching North Texas if North Texas makes the playoffs. So, yeah, I think that's a great hire. Eric Morris has proven to develop quarterbacks. He's really good at developing quarterbacks, and that, based on what I saw this year, it seemed like Oklahoma State needed help in the offense and quarterback departments. So I think for Oklahoma State, I think this is a great hire. I think Oklahoma State is going to need to put some money down, obviously, but otherwise, I think this is a great hire by Oklahoma State and the Cowboys. So, a lot of movement from the American Athletic Conference to the Power 4 level, which I'm curious to see how that's going to shake up the American Athletic Conference next year and how it's going to shake up recruiting there as well. Stanford also finally hired a new head coach officially, and they hired Tavita Pritchard as the head coach. And I don't really know too much about him, but Stanford hasn't been doing all too terribly this year. They had a pretty terrible start when they lost to Hawaii, but otherwise they haven't really done too bad. Not too bad. They did lose. They put up 20 against Notre Dame, and that's something that most teams this year can't say. So, that's pretty good for Stanford. They ended the year 4-8. Obviously, not great, but before playing Notre Dame, they did beat their rival Cal 31-10, and that was huge. They also beat their other wins include Florida State, when I believe Florida State was still ranked at that time when they played, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe they might have just become unranked at that point in the season. They also beat San Jose State and Boston College, which those last two are, they're okay wins, I suppose, but they are wins for Stanford, and that's something Stanford did not really do a lot of last year. So we'll give it to them. All right, so before I talk more about these conference championship matchups and also college basketball, I have a message from our sponsor.
This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schleier at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact.com. impact-coaching.com.
Okay, so let's start off with the Big Ten championship game, Indiana versus Ohio State. All right, so this game, it's going to be played in Indianapolis, which is kind of a central location for both of these teams. I mean, yeah, Bloomington is closer to Indianapolis than Columbus is, but I mean, both schools are within driving distance to Indy, which, I mean, yeah, obviously Ohio State's going to have to travel slightly more than Indiana, but the good thing, though, is that the fans are going to be able to get to this game a lot easier. And last year, the Penn State versus Oregon game was not very filled up. Not a lot of people ended up going to that game. And that's kind of what happened that kind of happens when you have a team all the way out on the West Coast and also a team from basically the East Coast. I mean, Penn State's basically on the East Coast, like coming into a central location that's really far away from both of their fan bases. There was a lot of Penn State fans at that game, but Lucas Oil was not filled up for that game, from what I remember. So I think this game will be definitely filled up. I mean, it is the number one team in the country versus the number 2 team in the country. So it better be filled up. But I think this game should be really interesting just because you have Ohio State, who has probably the best defense in the entire country and one of the most efficient offenses in the entire country on one team, and they lost a lot of people from last year, and they are still dominating whoever's in front of them. However, people see Ohio State as one of the most untested teams in the country, with their biggest win being Texas at home at the beginning of the year. And ever since then, like, Ohio State just never moved from that number 1 pedestal. I mean, Miami almost took the number 1 spot after beating Notre Dame and after beating South Florida and after beating, I think, Florida State at that point as well. That was before Miami took their first loss to Louisville. But Miami had a strong argument to be the number 1 team over the Buckeyes, and they just never wavered on that. They just kept Ohio State at the top. Oregon also at one point was in contention for that number 1 spot after playing Penn State. Obviously, the win against Penn State didn't really age all that well because Penn State just decided to curl up in a ball and die and not win a Big Ten conference game until playing against Michigan State a couple of weeks ago. I mean, they did beat Rutgers, and now Penn State is bowl eligible, I guess. Congrats, Penn State. But yeah, just it was a weird season for football when it came to the number 1 team. Ever since the week 2 rankings came out, there hasn't, the number 1 seed has not moved. And in previous years, that has not been the case. So, really intrigued that Ohio State has been able to hold on to that spot for as long as they have. But Indiana, I mean, they had to climb their way to the number 2 spot. I mean, they started off at 19 at the beginning of the season. They went down as low as 23 after playing Old Dominion and Indiana State and Kennesaw State. But then after playing Illinois, they jumped up to 11th and then just slowly worked their way up as teams above them lost, like Miami and Penn State. So and after beating Oregon, I mean, that helped them move up as well. So yeah, Indiana, I mean, both these teams just have had a different path to where they are now. And I think Indiana probably more battle tested, I think. I mean, you look at who Ohio State has played in the Big Ten. They played, Washington, not a bad opponent. Illinois, not a bad opponent. Penn State, despite, deciding to basically give up on their season at one point, not too bad of an opponent. And then Michigan, a few days ago, not too bad. But when you look at the standings, Ohio State played, they played Purdue, who's at the bottom. They played Wisconsin. They played Rutgers, Penn State, UCLA, Minnesota and Illinois and Washington. They're towards the top of the Big Ten. They're right in the middle of the Big Ten, upper middle. And then Michigan being the toughest team that Ohio State has played. While Indiana, they played the number 3 team in the Big Ten, Oregon. They played Iowa, who's number 6 right now in the Big Ten. No, actually, they're number 6. So they played number 6 Iowa in the Big Ten. They played Illinois, who's number 8 in the Big Ten. But then after that, it jumps down to UCLA, Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Purdue. But Indiana has played more of the top teams in the Big Ten than Ohio State has played this year. So that's where that's why I'm saying that Indiana is more battle-tested than Ohio State at this point in the year. Now, at one point, Indiana wasn't 100% healthy when going into some of these games, like the Penn State game, like the Wisconsin game. They didn't have Surratt, and they were down key defensive players as well that had a huge impact on the team as a whole. So they should be healthy. Surratt was in the game against Purdue. It kind of served up as a tune-up game, I guess. But he is back. So this Indiana team will kind of look the way they looked, hopefully, at the begin, when they played Illinois or when they played Oregon. They'll look more complete. So I think Indiana, they have a chance to win this game. They could catch Ohio State off guard. Ohio State, this is the first time they've beaten Michigan in 4 years. 2,000-something days since Ohio State had beaten Michigan. That streak now broken. I think the question is whether or not Ohio State is going to stay focused for this game. Is Ohio State going to let the Michigan game, take up too much of their minds and, just relish in that victory too much before playing a tough Indiana team? Or is Ohio State going to keep their eye on the ball, and are they going to take down Indiana? Either way, this is a battle for being the last remaining undefeated team in college football, because Indiana and Ohio State, they are the only 2 remaining undefeated teams after coming out of the regular season. So one of these teams is going to set themselves up to possibly be the next undefeated national champion. So this game for both these teams is hugely important. The last time that there was an undefeated team that won the national championship was back in the 2010s. Actually, no. Well, it was Michigan that did it. It was Michigan that did it in 2023. But this will be the first time since the 12-team playoff that there has been an undefeated national champion. Other 2 instances where there was an undefeated national champion were Georgia in 2022. That was undoubtedly the best team in college football that year. And the 2019 LSU Tigers, which, again, 15-0. You couldn't really argue that there was anyone better than that team. So, will Ohio State be the team that joins these teams in company and sit on the top of that mountain, being an undefeated national champion with the 12-team playoff? Or is it going to be Indiana after this Big Ten championship? We'll all find out together. I'm hoping Indiana wins, obviously, because this is the first time that Indiana has been to the Big Ten championship since there has been a title match. So this is a big deal. I think Indiana's going to come out guns a-blazing in the beginning of the game. And I think that's what the Hoosiers are probably going to need to do against this elite Ohio State defense. They're going to need to put them on the back foot in this game. All right, moving on to Georgia-Alabama, the SEC championship game, which will be played in Atlanta. I mean, both these teams kind of played not great in their rivalry games. I mean, Georgia played a really weird game against Georgia Tech. I mean, Georgia Tech's defense has looked really shaky the past 2 weeks after playing Boston College and Pitt. Just not good, but Georgia just wasn't able to do anything offensively, really, against Georgia Tech's defense. I mean, Georgia Tech offensively wasn't able to do much against Georgia's defense, which I guess is a good thing for Georgia, but that kind of goes back to what I've said in previous broadcasts, where Georgia is either really good on one side of the ball or they're really good on the other side of the ball. Whether it's really good on offense and not so great on defense, or vice versa. And in this case, it was the defense that looked really good and the offense that didn't really do much. They did a lot on the ground. They put almost 200 yards on the ground. That was the majority of their yards, but just not a lot of movement from either of these teams on the offensive side of the ball. It was a very defensive game, which was kind of surprising because last year it was a very high-scoring game. Granted, that was probably because of the 7 overtimes that they went to. So anyway, just not the best performance from Georgia. And then you look at Alabama, they played a really weird game against Auburn. I mean, they were dominating in the first half. It wasn't really that close at all. It was 17-6 at half. And then Auburn put up 14 points in the second half. Alabama was able to put up the necessary 10 points to secure the victory. Ty Simpson, he played a pretty solid game. I mean, he only had 122 yards, but he had 3 touchdowns for that. The Auburn defense was able to shut down the passing game from Alabama and forced them to run. And they did lose Alabama's running back. I believe it was Jam Miller. I think that's who it was. But he ended up going out in the middle of the game. I don't think he's going to be playing in the SEC championship game, and he's been their top rusher all year. So neither of these teams, like Alabama or Georgia, really look 100% right now after Alabama had a great game after Alabama lost to Oklahoma and played a decent game after that. And then Georgia had a blowout win over Texas and had played a great couple of games after that, but then had a shaky game against Georgia. I mean, neither teams really right now are looking 100% for me. But I think Alabama does have Georgia's number. They've won 10 out of the last 11 matchups that these teams have played against each other. So it's really hard for me to say that Georgia's going to beat Alabama, especially since Georgia didn't dominate Georgia Tech the way that I thought they were going to and thought that they should have. Because, I mean, giving up more than 500 yards of offense to Boston College is not great. So only being able to produce 200 something against that defense brings me a little bit of concern. So I think Alabama will end up winning this game. I also like the way Ty Simpson has been playing relatively since the Oklahoma game. So I think Alabama will end up getting the win here again because, like I said before, like Alabama just for some reason owns Georgia. Don't know why, but they just do. Then you've got Duke, Virginia. Virginia has been playing some pretty good football actually since the loss to Wake Forest, where they lost 16-9. They actually played Duke 2 weeks ago. They played them November 15th, and they won 34-17. And they dominated that game. And then they go and host Virginia Tech, and they dominated Virginia Tech by 20 points. They won 27-7. So I think Virginia should come away with the win against Duke. And this is a Duke team that, I mean, Virginia, yeah, they've had moments where they have failed to take care of the ball. But when Virginia takes care of the ball, they are a good team. Duke, they haven't really done a great job of taking care of the ball all year. They really haven't. And I mean, you look at some of these games like 32-25 against UNC, and UNC has been like really bad this year. Gave up 32 points to Wake Forest. I mean, they had to put up 49 to stay ahead of Wake Forest, and then they lost to UCONN less than a month ago. And then then before that they beat Clemson by 1. Like, Duke is so amazingly inconsistent. I genuinely don't know how they do that. And it's crazy to me that these tiebreakers that exist for Duke to get in over Miami. I'm sorry, but Duke, this is driving me crazy, but Duke should not be in this game. They should not be in the ACC title as a 7-5 team. They shouldn't. I mean, I get that there's tiebreakers, but oh my God. Like, seriously. Anyway, I think Virginia handles Duke again. I think it'll be a higher scoring game this time, but I think Virginia will handle business. And I hope they do, because Lord, if they don't, I don't know what's going to happen. But the ACC will probably not get a team in the playoff unless some crazy stuff happens and Miami ends up getting in as a at-large. Then there's BYU, Texas Tech. That's going to be at AT&T Stadium in Dallas. I think Texas Tech is going to just clobber BYU again. Texas Tech has just looked so good ever since that game. I mean, they've dominated basically every single team within the Big 12 besides Arizona State, which they were not 100% for that game, but they've dominated everyone else. They dominated Utah earlier this year, 34-10. They dominated Houston, 35-11. Both of those games on the road. Then they host Kansas and win that game 42-17. Then they beat Oklahoma State 42-0, and then beat Kansas State at Kansas State 43-20 when Kansas State was starting to build up momentum. Then, obviously, there was the BYU game a couple weeks ago where they won 29-7. Then they dominate UCF 48-9, and then they killed West Virginia on Saturday 49-0. Like, Texas Tech has been averaging almost 40 points per game, and that's even just with conference play, within conference play. Like, you don't see that very often. You really don't. So it's hard for me to say that BYU even has a chance in this game. I mean, especially considering that they've played relatively recently, I just don't see it. I think BYU might make it a little closer. I mean, that's probably the best that they'll do in this game, but I think Texas Tech wins this one hands down. Like, I really don't think this one is going to be very close. This will probably be the least competitive conference championship game. I mean, it'll be like what Arizona State versus Iowa State was last year, where Arizona State won by 20 plus, and it was not close. And that was when everyone knew that Arizona, even though Arizona State was preseason ranked last in the Big 12's preseason poll, they still showed that they were the best team in the conference by far and just separated themselves. And that's what Texas Tech has done this year. They have separated themselves from everyone else within the Big 12. And that is going to show on Saturday at 11 a.m. at AT&T Stadium. All right, let's quickly get into some college basketball. There's only about 9 minutes left, but this is the postseason for college football, so there was just a lot to talk about, and there's also, of course, the coaches carousel. Like, a lot of coaches got picked up and let go this week since it's the end of the regular season. So this is just when a lot of the movement for that was going to start. So for our college basketball journey, we're going to start on Monday, last week. Iowa State, they ended up beating St. John's 83-82. I mean, like I said last week, that was going to be a very close game, and it came down to the last shot. It did. And Iowa State was able to get one last one off, and they took the game. But it was a very back-and-forth game otherwise between the two teams. Then there was Alabama versus Gonzaga. Gonzaga won that game 95-85. Gonzaga, they were pretty controlling that game. They were able to shut down Alabama on the perimeter, and that ultimately led to Gonzaga's victory there. Moving on to Tuesday, we had Indiana, Kansas State. Indiana now a ranked team in the AP college basketball poll, ranked 25. That is due to change after this broadcast is heard. But they won against Kansas State at Assembly Hall, 86-69. Pretty dominant performance there by the Hoosiers. And Tennessee beat Houston in a very physical game, 76-73. And this was actually an upset because Tennessee was ranked 17th and Houston was ranked 3rd. But both of these teams are known for their physicality and how physical they are against their opponent, and especially on defense. So this game was bound to be a close game, and it did not disappoint. That might have been the game of the year for college basketball as of right now. I mean, that game was amazing. Then there was number 7 Michigan going up against number 21 Auburn. Michigan won 102-72. Michigan just I feel like they found their stride this past week after struggling against Wake Forest not too long ago. But Michigan had a very dominant week in college basketball this Thanksgiving week. So very good, dominant performance by Michigan against a pretty solid Auburn team. California Bears, they beat UCLA 80-72, and Cal currently unranked. UCLA ranked 18th, but huge win from the Cal Bears. Relatively up and down match, but Cal at the end they took control, and that was it. They took control of the game and maintained their lead with less than 2 minutes to go. Then there's, moving on to Wednesday, again, another Michigan game, but this is a ranked game. It was number 7 Michigan versus number 12 Gonzaga. And when I tell you the score, I don't think you'd be able to even think that these two teams are comparable, but Michigan just spanked Gonzaga 101-61. Now, like I said earlier, like Michigan was they've been going on a tear ever since they had to take Wake Forest to overtime to win. But Michigan in that game looked like one of the top 4 teams in the country. They were dominant the entire time. It wasn't really close at any point in that game at all. And then Alabama, they played Maryland. It was number 8 Alabama versus unranked Maryland. Alabama won 105-72. Alabama, they won that game they were just shooting so much better in every aspect. They were 45% from the 3. They were 57%, almost 58% from the field, and they only missed 3 out of their 18 free throws. Like they just dominated the Terrapins in that game, like in every facet of that game. Then on Thanksgiving Day, we had UNC versus Michigan State. Michigan State won that one 74-58. I mean, Michigan State, it was pretty competitive in the first half, but Michigan State, they started running away with it a little bit towards the beginning of the second half. And UNC, no matter what they did, they just could not catch up. Whatever they did, Michigan State, they just had an answer. And that led to Michigan State winning 74-58. Then there was number 4 Duke versus number 22 Arkansas. That one, pretty close game. It was 80-71. Both these teams, very, very solid, but Duke, they just consistently are great year in and year out. 50% from the field in comparison to Arkansas's 40%. But they weren't great from behind the free throw line, though. They were 66% from the free throw line, but still, from the field, 49% from the field. And then they dominated on the boards as well. They just had a lot more second chance opportunities that they created to get the win over Arkansas. And yeah, that was Thanksgiving Day. And Friday, on Friday, this is the last game that I'm going to have time to talk about here, but number 5 UCONN versus number 13 Illinois. UCONN wins this game 74-61. And I mean, this is kind of the game that Hurley has been wanting his guys to have a little bit. I mean, they were able to shut Illinois down from beyond the arc. Illinois was 20% from the 3-point line. And UConn, they were just way more effective they were just hitting their shots, and Illinois just could not hit their shots. UConn was 41% from the field and 35% from 3. Illinois was hanging on for dear life with their free throw percentage, with 94% from the free throw. But UConn had control of that game for basically the entire time. All right, with that, that's all that I have time to talk about today. If you're new here, please subscribe or to WVLP or to the Slide Into Sports Spotify, Patreon, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music's. But next week, huge slate of things that we're going to talk about. So make sure that you are connected to all the platforms so you don't miss anything. I'm also active on TikTok as well. I post a lot there. I didn't really post that much over the past couple of days just because, it's the holiday season and spend time with the fam. But yeah, like I said, that's all I've got for today. Subscribe to the platforms and see you next time. Slide out.